Yo. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.
I'm a headliner.
What's going on, Headliner Nation? We're on to week 8, baby. We made it through the disaster that was week 7. Kyle back with our wide receiver start and sit analysis for every matchup in the league this week. And Nation, we showed up last week. A crazy week. Tons of buys, lots of injuries. We knew that you needed us last week. We knew that we had to nail as many of our choices as possible because we were all looking for guys to fill in and help us get through the week. And Jake and I collectively hit over 70% accuracy at every single position. The first time that we have done that together, where we were over 70% at every single position. And for the wide receiver position, we ended up coming in at 73% this week. Christian Kirk, Michael Pittman, and Van Jefferson were all hits that I had on my side. Russell Gage, Khalif Raymond, Allen Lazard, all guys that I end up having as message. But 73% overall, you know my goal every single week is 70%. So to go over that and hit 73, and for Jake and I to collectively go over 70% at every position was absolutely awesome. And if that wasn't awesome, then maybe this is, because on the screen right now is our October giveaway, and October is almost done. How do you get in on the action? Well, you got to head over to Prize Picks, either on their website or download the app, create a new account, use the code word headliners, and deposit $20. First and foremost, Prize Picks, they're going to match your deposit anywhere from $20 up to $100, and then you're going to be entered into this giveaway for this sweet package of stuff you see right here on the screen. It doesn't matter if you sign up right now or if you've signed up using our code in the past. Anybody that has signed up using code word headliner is going to be eligible. But if you haven't done so yet, make sure you do now so you can get a shot at this sweet package below. But it is time, and I'm talking about the package on the screen, not down below the screen. Get your mind out of the gutter, Headliner Nation. It's time to move on, talk about wide receivers. We got some trouble brewing on Thursday Night Football. Why is that? Well, Green Bay has already lost Davante Adams for the week, who has entered into the COVID protocols. However, there is great concern among the team that there could be more people coming in the next couple of days. So what does that mean for Thursday Night Football? Well, it means we got to be taking a look at both Allen Lazard and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Now, for MVS, how healthy is he? He could return this Thursday. And now that they're going to be missing Davante Adams, it might even benefit the Packers more to say, yeah, we got to get MVS back on the field. The connection with Aaron Rodgers was forming before the injury happened. If you've been watching us all offseason, you probably remember me talking about it at that time. In the game right before he got hurt, MVS had 3 balls from Aaron Rodgers that would have been 2 big plays, at least 2 interceptions, or at least 2 touchdowns, and 1 guaranteed touchdown. Missed on those, come back the next week, ends up finding MVS. They look to be on the same page. MVS gets hurt. So we'll see what happens with that. Allen Lazard is also going to be a start for me. He's got touchdowns in back-to-back games. Not really going to go with Randall Cobb here. Now, if MVS ends up being hurt and not playing or limited, then I'll probably switch MVS's start to Randall Cobb and start him instead. But Cobb's had some really good matchups and some good opportunities and hasn't produced yet. So really not buying it this week either. For Arizona, all 3 of these guys are going to have to be starts on a continuous basis. We're still going to be starting all 3 of them for right now. Hopkins is the number 1. Okay, he's the number 1. He's the guy we're always starting. From there, though, Kirk's the guy that on a weekly basis, a little bit better upside. And then AJ Green is the guy that on a weekly basis is probably a little bit safer. AJ Green has only has 2 games this season in which he has less than 60 receiving yards. And the Green Bay defense with no Jair Alexander actually hasn't been playing that bad. They're only allowing 35 fantasy points per game to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. So it could be a lot worse. It could be a lot better. For missing their top cornerback, though, they haven't been playing too bad. I like all 3 of these guys this week, but as always, you'll have to temper expectations. Carolina at Atlanta. And listen, these two teams, their offenses, I mean, they stink worse than that gigantic dumpster out behind your favorite fast food restaurant. All right. It's just not good right now for either of these teams. For Carolina, DJ Moore is going to be our only start. Right now, I don't know about Terrace Marshall Jr. Missed last week. Keith Kirkwood ended up being a guy that got some time. We heard Shi Smith was supposed to be getting some. He didn't really do anything. Don't really know who the wide receiver 3 will be for certain if Terrace Marshall Jr. misses again. The one thing we do know is even if Terrace Marshall Jr. plays, he hasn't done anything this year. Same can be said for Robbie Anderson. I mean, doesn't it seem weird that a guy that has 40 targets over the last 4 weeks is unstartable right now? Like, how does that make any sense? The only reason we even looked at Robbie Anderson as a start last week is because we were missing so many guys, and we knew that he was going to get a lot of targets. He got 9 last week. So the targets were there, but again, no production. DJ Moore, I mean, he's the only guy that you can trust, but is there going to be a quarterback change coming? They say no, but Sam Darnold did get benched this past week. How much more are they going to be able to take of it? For Atlanta, Calvin Ridley, I mean, he's the only start from here for me as well. Carolina's defense has been pretty darn good this year. I mean, they're only allowing the 9th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. And Atlanta's offense, like I said, just hasn't been consistent. So last week, Calvin Ridley, not a great week other than he scored a touchdown. If he hadn't scored that touchdown, it would have been a miserable week. But once again, he led the team in targets with 10 of those. He's the number 1 wide receiver on that team. Even though I'm expecting a low ceiling this week, we're still running him out there. Miami at Buffalo, and boy, Tua has been playing so well since coming back from his injury, which is great to see. Glad Miami's sticking with him as of right now. But again, trade rumors still swirling. What could end up happening? We'll wait and see. But he's definitely been good enough that Jalen Waddle has been very, very good. Over the last 2 weeks, Jalen Waddle is the wide receiver 4. I mean, the connection right now with Tua is heating up. Will it continue when people get healthy? Will Fuller's kind of working his way back? No idea when Devontae Parker is going to be back, but we know that when they both come back, then that's just 2 more weapons added to this offense. It is a tough matchup this week, though. Buffalo only allows the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So even though Waddle has been good, we're still going to put him as a start because Tua and him just on the same page. The connection's so good right now. Just expect a really, really low ceiling this week. And for Buffalo, Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders, I'm going to put all 3 of these guys as a star. Miami allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. They allow the 4th most receptions and and touchdowns to wide receivers, and the 3rd most receiving yards to wide receivers. All 3 of these guys for Buffalo should ball this week. San Francisco is going to head to the Windy City this week. Deebo Samuel, I mean, he's just been playing so well. The wide receiver 5 on the season right now, and Chicago is allowing the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. So with how well Deebo Samuel's playing, obviously a guy that's going to be continuing to be a start for us. But no one else is playing well on this team. I mean, George Kittle, obviously, he's been hurt. None of the wide receivers are doing anything. Really, the only thing that San Francisco is doing right now, throwing the ball to Deebo and trying to run the football as much as possible. So we'll see what that brings against Chicago this week. Not going to be the best matchup in the world for the San Francisco 49ers for how well they're playing right now. Deebo should still get his this week, though. And for Chicago, we're finally doing it. I mean, I don't know what else to say at this point. I mean, I could sit down and do a video breakdown with you of the Chicago Bears offense. And, there's been a lot of negatives with Justin Fields. There's been a lot of positives that just haven't turned into production yet, if that makes sense for you. Whose fault is it? Well, it's a combination of a lot of things. The offensive line is awful. I mean, it is just absolutely bad. They're giving up way too many sacks. They've given up the most sacks in the NFL. Justin Fields has been hit the 4th most time of any quarterback in the league, and that's considering the guy wasn't even a starter to begin the season. So I think that tells you right there how much he's been getting hit. And I think it was per Football Focus, not 100% sure. Somebody had tweeted it. I retweeted it. So if you go to my Twitter, at KRich1532, you'll find it, and then we can give credit to who it was. But they even said that right now, only 18% of the sacks that Justin Fields has taken are actually his fault. The rest of them are the offensive line's fault. So, I mean, it's poor play calling. It's not utilizing him to the best of his ability. And again, Justin Fields, he is a rookie. He is making some mistakes, holding the ball too long at certain points and things like that. So until they can get things figured out, and we know that there's not going to be any Matt Nagy more than likely this week who tested positive for COVID. We'll see if he ends up getting on. I doubt it. I doubt we'll see him on Sunday, but we'll see what it's like. A game plan without Matt Nagy for the week. Kind of excited to see that. Obviously sucks why he's missing it, but excited to see what it will look like. But, Robinson, Mooney, Goodwin, all three of them, they're just going to have to be sits for right now. Pittsburgh at Cleveland, and for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Diontae Johnson, Chase Claypool, both these guys are going to be starts for me. Most of the targets are going to be going to these guys, right? I mean, Juju Smith-Schuster being out for the season now. We've talked about Pat Freiermuth and what that means for him, and we'll talk about it more on the tight end video. But for these two guys, we know that these guys are going to combine probably for about 20 targets a week, right? Diontae Johnson could see a little bit more than 10. Chase Claypool could see a little bit less, but these guys combined are going to be right around 20 targets per week. That's going to leave another 5 to 10 targets for Najee Harris, and then another possibly 5 or so targets for Pat Freiermuth. So Cleveland's defense too, we've talked about it in a couple of other shows over the past couple of weeks. Not bad, not great, definitely struggling at times. They have given up the second most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers over the last 2 weeks. Pittsburgh having to go to Cleveland now. This is going to be a tough matchup for them on the road, but Johnson and Claypool should score more than enough points to help your fantasy team out this week. And then for the Cleveland Browns, we're going to go with Jarvis Landry and OBJ both as starts this week. Pittsburgh, again, this is a defense that we've talked about a lot this year where it's bend, don't break, right? I mean, they've played well at times. They've played awful at times. It's not the same defense, though. It's not the same getting to the backfield, knocking you down. TJ Watt obviously playing excellently right now, but they're giving up lots of big plays. They're giving up scores. They're not playing that well. In case Keenum could end up being the guy this week for Cleveland. No guaranteeing that Baker Mayfield's going to be back anytime soon. When does he come back? Case Keenum didn't look too bad last week. Can we get Nick Chubb back this week? If we can get Nick Chubb back, obviously that's a huge help to this offense and helps offset it a little bit more. Dearness Johnson looked good last week, though, so I still think this is an offense that can stay balanced and give these guys enough fantasy points. But I also do believe that Odell Beckham Jr. with Case Keenum is a little bit better, because I think Case Keenum at this point is he's going to make some more of those throws that Baker Mayfield might be hesitant to. For whatever reason, Mayfield, sees OBJ there, just isn't quite getting the ball to him, doesn't trust the throw, whatever it may be. Case Keenum to me is going to make a few more of those throws, and that's why I'm going to go back to OBJ as being a start this week. Philly at Detroit, and for the Philadelphia Eagles, Devontae Smith could be a great matchup this week. It could end up being an awful matchup this week. The one thing that's been more inconsistent than the Phillies, talking baseball, the only thing that's been more consistent than the Eagles' offense has been Detroit's defense. I mean, at certain points, they look great. I mean, against Lamar Jackson a few weeks back, they didn't look too bad. Yeah, Marquise Brown dropping a couple balls definitely helped them out, but they didn't look bad at all, right? There's been other times, even like the first half this past week against the Rams, they looked okay, but they're just not that good. So what ends up happening this week? Devontae Smith could be a guy that comes out and gets you 20 fantasy points this week. He could be a guy that comes out and gets you 5 fantasy points this week. We know that he's going to lead the team in targets, though. It's all going to depend upon what Jalen Hurts shows up. Is it a Jalen Hurts that is confident in his decision-making ability and makes the good throws and isn't off target all over the place? We know Detroit's probably not going to be in the backfield a whole lot, so that's going to give him a little bit more time to make those decisions and make those throws. Devonta Smith, hopefully, he ends up getting it this week. And for the Detroit Lions, Khalif Raymond, I just can't go with him as a start going up against Philadelphia. I just have Darius Slay is probably going to be on him if I had to guess. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, here's the thing. He just disappeared completely last week, right? Nothing to be seen. Is it a better start this week? Yes, and I think he gets more targets this week, but the Eagles are allowing the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Jared Goff just hasn't performed that well. Lots of targets going to DeAndre Swift. TJ Hawkinson, we'll talk about that in the tight end video, but this is a better matchup for him. Because of that, I got to be out on the Detroit wide receivers this week. Tennessee at Indianapolis, and for the Tennessee Titans, this team is playing a lot better now, right? I mean, looking a whole lot better than they did a few weeks back. A.J. Brown, back-to-back huge performances. Hopefully you held on to him and didn't give up on him, because he's going to be a guy that's going to help you win your league the rest of the season. Julio Jones starting to get healthy again, hopefully, all right? And again, injuries kind of derailed the beginning of the season for him. New team, new playbook, new quarterback, all of those things you really got to be healthy and on the field all the time for. And if you're like Julio Jones coming off and on and having issues with that some of that rapport could end up taking a little bit longer to build. I think as he gets healthier, I think we're going to see better performances. And this week, going up against Indianapolis, who allow over 38 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. And with Tennessee's offense starting to click now, finally, I mean, you're running the ball a lot with Derrick Henry, but outside of A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, there's really nobody else competing for targets. Both of these guys are going to be starts this week for Indianapolis. For the Indianapolis Colts, a couple of weeks ago, I told you about Michael Pittman, right? I mentioned it in a couple of videos. I said if he starts scoring and starts getting bigger plays, this is going to be a guy that's going to be a great asset to your team coming up. He's all the way up to the wide receiver 19 on the season now. Tennessee has given up the most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers this season, but they've only given up the 4th most over the last 4 weeks. So they're performing a little bit better. And obviously last week against Kansas City made life hell for Patrick Mahomes. Now, I don't expect them to continue to perform like that on a consistent basis, but this week, Paris Campbell is going to be one of my prize picks props to watch. Right now, over on Prize Picks, the over is set at 52.5 yards, and I am taking the over at 52.5 yards for Michael Pittman this week, going up against Tennessee, a team whose defense has definitely given up a lot of points and a lot of yards to wide receivers this season. Cincinnati and the New York Jets, Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins. Ja'Marr Chase coming off just an absolutely huge performance. We did discuss some concerns with the wide receivers this past week as well. Marlon Humphrey has been an absolute lock at the wide receiver or at the cornerback position for the Baltimore Ravens this season. But he kind of went back and forth between the two, ended up facing T. Higgins a little bit more. I mean, he was kind of all over the place, really. He didn't lock in to Ja'Marr Chase the entire time. But T. Higgins, he was forced 15 targets. So even in a tougher matchup for him last week, they were still forcing the ball his way, led the team with 15 targets. Now, Ja'Marr Chase had the best game, obviously, but also he now has the most receiving yards for any NFL wide receiver in the history of the league through his first 7 games. Ja'Marr Chase is the absolute truth. And then for Tyler Boyd, he's going to be a sit moving forward. CJ Uzomah is taking a lot of the targets that he was getting at one point in time. I did have Tyler Boyd as a start last week. Ended up missing on it, obviously. But I even mentioned then, too, like we have to keep an eye on this because if CJU starts taking a lot of those intermediate targets, which he did again this past week, then Tyler Boyd is going to be kind of screwed in terms of his volume. And this is another good matchup for CJU. So I've got him. I'm going to end up having him as a start, but Tyler Boyd's going to be a sit for me because of that. On the side of the New York Jets, I mean, what is there to say? Who's going to be the quarterback this week? I have absolutely no idea. They just traded for Joe Flacco again, trying to bring Joe Flacco in to be that backup. Mike White ended up coming in last week, which if you know who he is, you know a lot more about football than a lot of people because nobody knew who Mike White was before last week. And then, this is a tough matchup. This is a tough matchup, and it is going to bring my second Prize Picks prop to watch of the week because I'm taking the under 54.5 yards from Corey Davis. Now, why is that? Awuzie has been one of the best cornerbacks in the league this season. Awuzie's completion percentage when targeting him, 53.8. Eli Apple, who was a complete bust at one point in time, his completion percentage when targeting him, 61.8%. So the outside matchups are going to be hell this week. They're just not going to be good. There's not going to be a lot of room for any type of growth for them, any type of big games. Even receiving yards are going to be hard to come by this week. So Corey Davis for me, I'm taking the under at 54 and a half yards, but their nickel corner or their slot corner, 78.9% completion percentage for Mike Hilton. So I am going to go with Jamison Crowder because his work out of the slot for whatever QB is coming in is going to be a lot better. And Joe Flacco, who was once, here in New York, him and Jamison Crowder, they might know each other a little bit. And because of that, we could see the ball going his way more often. The Rams ended up escaping the Detroit Lions last week. And even though they escaped that matchup, now they get to go to Houston for an even easier matchup, right? Who would think? The Detroit Lions, they've been absolutely awful. Now the Rams get to go to Houston. Congrats for them on nailing a nice, easy schedule these last couple of weeks. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp obviously continues to just ball out this season. Wide receiver 12, though, for Robert Woods over the last 3 weeks. So you're being rewarded right now if you ended up waiting on him. So congrats on that. I would like to roll Van Jefferson out this week, but Houston can't stop tight end, so I'm going to end up going with Tyler Higbee as kind of that number 3 option on the team this week. And for the Houston Texans, Brandon Cooks is going to be a start. Ty God Taylor on the way back. He's going to start practicing this week. Will he play on Sunday? Oh man, I sure hope so. Because if he does, Brandon Cooks, it could be a lot. That could be great for him the rest of the season. Now, this matchup's not great. I'm not expecting a whole lot in this matchup, but Brandon Cooks and Ty God to begin the season, holy cow. Tons of targets, receptions. It was like 21 targets in the first 2 games, 14 receptions, went over 200 yards, had a touchdown. So those guys were really in sync to begin the season. Now, it's good for the long term, but for this week, I'm not feeling too many of the Houston wide receivers, but I will put Brandon Cooks as a start based on the targets alone. New England at the Los Angeles Chargers. And if you would have told me that last week New England would have put up 40-something points against the New York Jets and their wide receivers would do basically nothing, I'd be kind of shocked. But that's really what happened. Outside of a huge pass play on a trick play where Kendrick Bourne threw a touchdown to Nelson Aguilar, didn't do anything. The wide receivers didn't really do anything. And that was a tough matchup. The New York Jets have been stopping wide receivers basically all season. It was really the running backs and the tight ends last week that did a whole lot for New England. So for New England, the Chargers allow the fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers, and they're coming out of the bye. So they got an extra week to even prepare for New England. So because of that for me, Nelson Aguilar, Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne, all of them are going to be sits. But the tight ends, again, the tight ends will be somebody that we talk about in that video. But that's one of the reasons why I've got these guys as sits, because I'm feeling the tight ends this week. Absolutely loving it. For the LA Chargers, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, expecting bounce back from both of these guys, expecting the Chargers to look a lot better than they did before going into the bye. The matchup against New England for the wide receivers, New England's defense has played well at times this season, but I just think coming out of the bye, the Los Angeles Chargers are going to be ready to roll, and they are going to fly. Jacksonville is going to end up heading out west to face Seattle this week. And again, they're coming out of the bye as well. So hopefully Urban Meyer spent more time in the film room than he did up college girls' hind ends. Because if he did, then hopefully they have a great game plan coming into this week. So Marvin Jones Jr., Laviska Shenault, going to start both of these guys. Again, Jacksonville 2 weeks ago, going into the bye while they were in while they were in London, they got stuff going, right? Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault didn't have too bad of games. Jones had the much better game at that point. And they may be behind most, if not all of this game against Seattle. So for Jacksonville, do they have the game plan set up to get Laviska Shenault and Marvin Jones Jr., the 2 most talented wide receivers, the ball early and often? I sure hope so, because if I have to watch Jamal Agnew continue to get targets, my God. If he couldn't get targets in Detroit, why would he be getting targets here? Urban, I don't get you sometimes. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, it's tough to trust Lockett right now, right? He hasn't looked good with Geno Smith. He's been very inconsistent this season. DK Metcalf, obviously, he's played a little bit better with Geno, but not a whole lot. So DK Metcalf, he's going to be a start. Yes. Tyler Lockett, I'm going to have to put him as a start again this week. Jacksonville is allowing the 10th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. And really, if they go another week of just not being able to get him, I mean, are they going to focus on him this week and say, what do we need to do to get Tyler going? Like, what do we need to do to get him more involved? And if it's not the big plays because Geno can't make it work, then what can we do with potentially some screens or some slants, get him the ball in open space, different things like that? Can they do that this week with Tyler Lockett? My hope is yes, because this is a defense that he should be able to score on. Washington at Denver, and Washington, Terry McLaurin's coming off a huge week last week, but Denver is going to be a lot tougher than what the matchup was for them last week. And okay, Denver has been very good at times against the pass. Now, there's been some performance where they haven't and some where they have. They're kind of right in the middle right now in terms of how many points they're giving up and what they're giving up, statistics-wise to opposing wide receiver. So I'm going to temper expectations with Terry McLaurin just a little bit this week, but not a whole lot. Still love Terry M. Not going to be off him at any point in time. Curtis Samuel is an update. He's kind of working out alone by himself right now. How far are we away? Probably a little bit further away from playing than actually practicing, but maybe we do see him at practice a little bit very soon. And then for the Denver Broncos, Courtland Sutton coming into last week was the wide receiver 20, okay? But he's got basically 3 straight weeks of pretty darn good games. And now he's getting a Washington team allowing the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Yes, Courtland Sutton. Give me some Courtland Sutton this week. Absolutely love it. Tim Patrick, awful performance last week, but he should be good for a touchdown this week. Washington has allowed the 2nd most touchdowns to wide receivers this season. Jerry Jeudy closing in on playing or on starting to practice again. Don't expect him back this week, though. So Tim Patrick, he will be a start for me. Tampa Bay at the New Orleans Saints. And for Tampa Bay, I'm going to put Antonio Brown as a start right now, even though we don't know about him yet. Kind of a surprise inactive last week after hurting himself in practice. We'll see if that ankle is feeling better and getting him back out there this week. I mean, when AB misses, Evans and Godwin are absolutely insane. So if AB were to miss again for any reason, we know that Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, both of them will be locked in, surefire starts, and they'll be much higher in the rankings. If for some reason AB is not able to go or is able to go this week, then again, Antonio Brown kind of takes over that wide receiver 1 status on the team where he has a nice floor and a good ceiling. Chris Godwin kind of right behind him, and then Mike Evans where you have a decent ceiling, but his floor is much lower as well. For the New Orleans Saints, what can you say about this team right now? I mean, other than Alvin Kamara, there's nobody on this team that is consistent, trustworthy, anything. Tampa Bay is going to be putting up points. We know New Orleans is going to have to throw it. We know Tampa Bay has been banged up in the secondary. Marquez Callaway, we're going to put him as a start this week, but my God, I don't love it. Dallas at Minnesota is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. Don't forget, Manscaped is back as one of our primary sponsors this year. So thankful to them for coming back over and hanging out with us this season. And they're bringing the discounts to you as well. Make sure if you're going to be buying anything for yourself, you head over to manscaped.com. Use code word headliners when you check out because you're going to get 20% off all their great products and free shipping. You can't beat that, so head over to manscaped.com and make sure you do that when checking out. For the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, Dallas and Minnesota, just a plethora of delicious wide receivers to watch score some fantasy points this week. CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, both of these guys are going to be starts for me. Coming out of the bye, hopefully Cooper's fully healthy. Obviously, going into the bye, he was a little bit banged up. To note, though, Michael Gallup, he can start practicing soon, and it sounds like he is going to. So how is that going to affect Cooper and Lamb moving forward? I don't think a whole lot. I think, if anything, it could end up hurting Dalton Schultz more, but we'll see how that works out. But Cooper, Lamb, guys, they're getting targets. Lamb coming off a huge game from a couple of weeks ago. Cooper is a guy who hasn't had the huge performances that he's had a couple of years ago, but his floor has been a little bit higher as well. So he's been a little bit safer than what we've seen in years past. For Minnesota, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, both of these these guys are going to be starts. We know Diggs can pick it, right? We know that Diggs for the Cowboys has been really, really good this year. He's got a lot of picks. He's created a lot of turnovers, but even though that happens, he gives up a lot of yards as well. Justin Jefferson, yeah, maybe Diggs gets a pick against Kirk Cousins, but we're locking Justin Jefferson in and Adam Thielen as just great starts this week in what will probably be a high-scoring game with plenty of points to go around. The New York Giants are basically the South Park equivalent to football teams at this point. I mean, I haven't watched South Park in a very, very long time. Not really my cup of tea. But from what I do remember, in every single episode, they would yell, "Oh my God, you killed Kenny," right? Well, it seems like all of the wide receivers in New York are constantly dying every single game. I mean, yeah, overreacting a little bit there, but my God, the IR for them right now is absolutely ridiculous. Kenny Galladay's still not back. Sterling Shepard comes back, then gets himself hurt again. Kadarius Toney is hurt to start the season. Doesn't do anything for the first couple of games. Then all of a sudden all these injuries happen and the volume picks up for him. Then he's hurt and now he's going to miss a few weeks. What in the world is going on with you, New York? I don't know what to do with this team right now. The only thing we can do, though, we could start Darius Slayton this week against Kansas City. Kansas City, honestly, has been an absolute mess now all season long. When are they going to get their ish together? Hopefully soon, but for Darius Slayton, because he's going to be really the only healthy pass catcher, we'll go ahead and roll with him. Now, obviously, too, we got to wait on Saquon Barkley and see what happens with him. That can end up affecting it a little bit, but you got to rely on Slayton. I can't really go with Dante Pettis as a start this week. Let's wait and see. If for some reason one of these other guys ends up coming back, Sterling Shepard ends up coming back, Pettis obviously will be a sit. If Barkley comes back, he'll be Pettis will end up being a sit. If Barkley's out, Galladay's out, Shepard's out, Toney's out, then Pettis will probably be a start for me as well. But we got to keep an eye on that. And for Kansas City, Tyreek Hill will be a start, but if the New York Giants are like the South Park of football teams, then I would assume like the wide receiver 2 is the Where's Waldo of football teams, because you're constantly searching for who the wide receiver 2 is going to be because they all look the same. Who's going to be? I mean, Byron Pringle last week comes out and he's the guy. And then one week it's Mecole Hardman. Then another week it's Demarcus Robinson. And they signed Josh Gordon and he hasn't done anything yet. I don't know what to do with this team anymore. I don't. Hopefully they figure it out, though, because that would be awesome. Well, there you have it, Headliner Nation. Week 8 start and sit for wide receivers in the books. Make sure you hit the like button for me. Make sure you subscribe here if you're new to the channel, and leave me a comment down below. Is there somebody that you've got your eye on this week? Any prize picks that you've got your eye on? Somebody that maybe I have listed as a start that you just can't bring yourself to put in your lineup this week now that Buy-A-Geddon is, or Buy-A-Geddon? I can't even get it right anymore. That's how much I want to forget last week. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get out of here. All of you stay safe and stay healthy. And I will see you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.